instructions, guys. Take one off the top and one off the bottom. Then pass the rest of them to people who have not gotten them yet. Go.
Roger. Stop.
So if anybody gets that wrong,
we all failed because you told us to bring the ones you gave us yesterday back today.
Yeah.
fail. Fail. Oh, you weren't here. So you guys are good, and him, everyone else. So guys, today we're going to talk about winterization for those who winterize. We're going to talk about spring startup for those who winterize. And we're also going to talk about in-season checkups. Are you leaving yet or what?
No. Check on you.
I'm sorry, I didn't care what you were saying.
She said she's going to come out and make sure you're a chicken.
She said, shit, I am not a chicken. So, just so you know, the in-season checkups are just like a spring startup, but we don't have to fill their main line. That's like the main difference. Otherwise, it's basically the same thing. I guess I better get one of these sheets too. How far around have we moved? Oh. Chris is hoarding them. So just a disclaimer at the beginning of this little speech. If you're trying to follow with me, you're going to get lost. I just wanted you guys to have a copy, to see a copy of the list that we use. Not necessarily in the order we use it. So, sorry about that. I intend at some point, I've said this.
When you winterize the station, does your tech take one of these with him?
Yes.
Fill it out and bring it back to
Yes.
you so you have record of it?
Yes.
I need to give it. Oh, never mind. Never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the purpose. Okay.
So first of all, typically when you're winterizing a pump station, you're not testing anything because you don't have water. So for those who live above whatever latitude, you know, our water gets shut off October 15th-ish. And then we have until usually middle of November to get everybody winterized before it starts getting cold. One thing to keep in mind when we're talking about pump station winterization is we don't hook up compressed air to the pump station. I get calls, it seems like every winter, say, where do I hook up my air hose to blow out the pump station? You know, you call a professional, right? Now, you guys may fall into that category after my little spiel, but we don't blow the water out, we drain it out, right? And the reason we can't blow it out is because there's valves that aren't going to open with air pressure and clear out tubing that is full of water. So on all of our checklists, checking the sumps for sediment accumulation is on there. Winter is probably the easiest time to deal with that. Winter, spring, before there's water, because you don't have to worry about shutting off the canal, you know, with your head gate to pump the water out and clean out however you choose to do so. We use vacuum trucks, but I've also heard people use, you know, skinny people and buckets with shovels.
Oh, thank God we're out.
Hey, where's Jose? Oh, he's down there. But you got to remember confined spaces, right? If you're going into a confined space, there's a bunch of rules you got to follow. So vacuum trucks are the way to go. You know, just keeping pump stations clean, clear from debris, and I'm going just item by item down the checklist for now. So if you feel like following along, that's totally cool. The filters. Now, not all pump stations have a filter fan kit, but for those who do, there's these little media filters. Some of them look different, but they all serve the same purpose. If you get like some bugs in here, or just a little bit of like whatever, you can just kind of tap it out. These are pretty spendy, so I usually try to get the most we can out of them.
Spendy.
Spendy.
Spendy. They're expensive.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, what's expensive?
We don't have that.
Like, how much is one? Spend. Just curious.
A bag is probably like 35, 40 bucks. Well, it depends. There's
like a
different
bag of
sizes.
10 or-
There's 5.
Gee, that's spend.
Yeah, well, tell a homeowner. Filters for 30, 40 bucks. Good lord.
Put them in your furnace, don't you? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, in fact, you can actually have filters made if you're ambitious, but I'm not. So if I have the opportunity to do so, I always choose to have my customers blow out their main line before I do a winterization. This will totally prevent, after I've winterized it, someone from opening that valve and bringing water back into the system, which I won't even know about until the next spring when there's a hole in their manifold or whatever, which we've had happen a couple of years ago.
Correct. Check that.
Yeah. Yeah, ball valves, man. So if I have that opportunity, I always try to do that, have them blow out their main line first. First thing I do is shut the isolation valve to the pump station, isolate it from the system, and that's the only valve I'll leave shut all the way throughout this whole process, even after I leave. The next thing is really important for anyone who's opened up a radiator cap while the engine is hot. That's a lesson I'm only going to learn once. Well, then along with the lesson I learned when I pulled off a transducer when there's still pressure. That is a lesson I will only learn once. So before you go taking stuff apart, you need to get the pressure out of the manifold. Otherwise, you'll get wet, and hopefully that's the worst of it. So if you have a hose bib, if you have, every system is different. Usually we'll put a hose bib on the manifold. Otherwise, you can manually open a pressure relief valve. There's many different ways to do it, depending on the system. So once we know, or once we think we know, there's no pressure in the manifold, I'll take the transducer off with a crescent wrench, which I'm not going to do today, because I'm just going to have to put it right back on when we get to the startup section. All right. But, well, we can imagine that I have a transducer in my hand, fresh off the manifold, bottom of it here. What I do is with a firm grip, I will fling the water out of the inside of it, right? Now, we've had a service tech here that would take a pancake compressor and blow the water out of it. Quite frankly, if it was my pump station in my backyard, I would take that transducer inside where it's not going to freeze for sure with any water in it. That's what you do?
Yeah, all the transducers we take inside.
See, I'm always afraid to do that because I don't know with 100% certainty during the winterization season if I'm going to be the one coming back for the spring startup. Or even if I'm this company, So we will take the pressure transducer and then the plug.
Even better reason to take the pressure transducer.
Oh, no, people get pissed off. Hey, I called Joe Schmo pumping service and they say my transducer is gone. And then they call you an asshole and it's like, whoa! Well, people don't need to be calling you one. You gotta hide that.
It's your own private stream.
Hiding it from a room full of assholes. Come on. We're all
Okay,
pretty
so
fair.
pressure transducer, imaginary, it's in my hand, goes in the control panel for our typical winterization. Now, on the bottom of the manifold, one side or the other, I've only seen one without it, and that was a total foobar, which we winterized by taking one of the valves off. There is a plug in the bottom of the manifold. Take that puppy out. In the panel it goes. That's another one of those spring startup issues. Now the high pressure switch or low pressure switch Personally, I've never had freeze damage to a switch. However, I have pulled off a bunch of high pressure switches and low pressure switches that the bottom port is totally clogged up with rust and who knows what else. So I always make it a point to include that in the winterization as if it were a transducer, mostly to look at that port, and if it's clogged up with whatever, usually rust, I can clear it. Oh my goodness, I'm like following the list and stuff. So we did the plug. Now the CW valve, just a rainbird valve, we were just talking about it. If you just unscrew the solenoid from the top of the valve, that relieves all of the pressures that I know of in there. And I have never had a problem after winterizing them in that manner. So, alright, let's talk pressure relief valves. So all pressure relief valves have tubing from the pilot regulator to the valve body itself. So all of these tubings, if they're brass, I've seen guys just take the whole tube off and throw it in the panel. Personally, I'm always afraid of losing stuff like that, so I'll take the lower end off of each tube and slightly disconnect it and leave it that way. The water will drain out, evaporate, whatever. The automated filters are a little bit more complicated, and I've seen a lot of technicians that will bring like 5 different colors of tape, electrical tape, and each tube they'll put a little, this color matches that color on this fitting kind of thing. But the same rule applies. You find your tube, that's the lowest point. Disconnect it. If it's a rubber, vinyl, plastic tube, I will fling the water out. And I always get water everywhere, but that's okay. And as you see on our list, primarily we're dealing with SAF filters, or TAF filters, which now we're using VAF, but for all intents and purposes on a winterization, they're the same. You just find the lower part of the tubing, remove it. If you're ambitious like me, I fling the water out, and I've never had a problem. Now, all of the valves on this pump station need to be in their half open, half closed position. Anybody tell me why that might be?
A little pill where the axle goes in the top or bottom, holds water otherwise.
Is that right? Well, I have confirmation too. Okay, because somebody was asking me, why do you leave them half cocked? I'm like, well, if they're closed, there might be water between the valve and the check valve.
Yeah.
If they're all the way open,
you close that pill. The only time they ever get water into where the axle is when they're halfway between.
Oh, if I could go back in time and tell him. Because I'm like, gosh, I don't know, man. You know what really helps me is I can walk by a pump station and just glance at it, and I know whether it's been winterized or not by the position of the valves. Another thing with the TAF filters, we do. All right. Well, this is a VAF filter. Oh, this is a perfect example. So, not all at once, but come around here and check this out, how it's mounted vertically. And what I'm wanting you to think about in your brain is, how do you get the water out of that canister? Right, there's a flush valve on the bottom. Right after the flush valve, there's a union. So you have to disconnect the union and open the nut up on the filter body. And I'll take the whole freaking filter in half and dump all the water out and just leave it set on the floor. Because if you don't, even if you drain all the tubing and do just like I told you before, it's still full of water. And we haven't had to sell many of those filter bodies for a few years, but man, they're expensive.
Those little D200 bodies, I think they're going metal now, aren't they?
Oh yeah, I haven't
Plastic
seen any metal
ones.
ones yet.
Plague. They change it to a metal body.
Well, you know, in my experience, especially with these bigger filters, as long as you winterize them right and like give them just the slightest bit of maintenance, they last just about forever.
You take the bonnet off the valve, flush valve. 4 bolts.
I don't.
I do.
Off of the Amiot flush valve to protect the solenoid.
The solenoid and the cap of the valve and everything else.
In the diaphragm, it said it'll expand, the air, ice will expand and make a nice little bulge, and it'll stay there in your diaphragm. So yeah, you should clean the water out of the top of the diaphragm.
So you're saying take the bolts off of the
Yeah,
valve
take
itself.
the bolts off, take it off, drain it, put it back on. Or
Yeah, and this.
take it off and turn the diaphragm 180 degrees, give it more life.
Yeah, I do that with pressure relief valves that are having problems.
And you gotta get the disc filter and then screw a plastic disc filter, dump it out too.
Plastic disc filter.
Yeah, a little. Doesn't have one, huh?
No, it's on the back.
It's on the back.
Dang it! About this one? Yeah.
That one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and winterization. For anyone who hasn't seen this, this is the filter that goes to the pilot on the valve, the control pilot on the valve. You know, usually we don't have problems with them, but winterization is like the best opportunity for you to clean this out. Because if you leave it over the winter, it's going to dry and get all crusty and nasty. Same with the filter inside. If you have water when you get there, I'll run the pump station and run 3 or 4 flush cycles and just, you know, get it as clean as we can before it dries up.
Or you can, at the same time of winterizing, you might as well do a half maintenance. Go on apart to winterize, put the screen clean in dry storage. Spring startup, everything's clean, brand new. Put it in, start them up. It's like doing a half PM in the winter and half PM in the spring. So
Yeah, and you know, after you do a bunch of startups, you'll realize, man, if I only had to clean this filter in the fall.
You don't take the bonnet off your relief valve either?
No,
No.
I've
Seen
never.
more of those broken than you can
Yeah.
imagine.
No kidding.
Yeah, gotta pop them off. You know, the water's got nowhere to go. It sits there.
it breaks that cast iron.
Yeah.
I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, it'll break your CRL too.
Yeah.
And those
You hear that,
vibes, what are
Dean?
they, 400 bucks?
CRL goes to the maintenance barn.
Yeah.
Goes under the mechanics
scrap
bench
pile.
for the winter.
Well, maybe we ought to.
That's where it goes.
Maybe we ought to add that to our list here.
Yeah. And plus, when you're opening up your bonnet, you're half PMing. You open it up, you make sure your stems are nice and
I was
polished.
gonna say, if you're gonna open it up, you may as well clean it out because it's gonna be half full of silt.
It's just extra money for the service guy.
Yeah, I dropped the bonnet back on without the diaphragm in there. I leave the diaphragm in the cabinet.
You leave the diaphragm in the cabinet?
I do.
I go one step further. I actually put antifreeze on my shafts and then just put it together and do not tighten the bolts down.
Yeah, that'll do.
So
Part of the
that's
assembly
ready
in the
to go.
spring, just putting the relief valve back together.
Sorry, Dave.
Well, let me remind you guys that were here yesterday. All right. It's a lot funner to teach people things they want to learn, right? And so, I guess to add to that, we don't know everything here, you know. We know most things, you know. If we have a problem with it, we'll change our procedure, blah, blah, blah. So, the valve's in the half open position. By half open, if you did not already know, that's what we're talking about. And that goes for gate valves, ball valves, butterfly valves, every valve you can imagine, if it can be in the half-cocked position.
And again, that goes right back to the maintenance thing. If you find an issue with the valve, then you can write it up for your customer and tell them, hey, look, we can bring in a new valve when we start this thing up, or you're gonna have problems with this valve.
Oh, yeah.
Basically,
Yep.
Yeah, again, that's,
Don't do that.
yes.
Yeah, usually in the winterization season we don't run off many quotes, but spring startup,
Oh, God.
geez.
Yeah, try to get people to do the work during the winter time. Like I got several customers now doing rebuilds on pumps, motors, stuff like that, you know, they don't want to spend the time during, the spring.
Yeah, well, they don't want downtime.
Right. It's the best time to do it. Plus it keeps money in our pocket in the winter time.
Okay, so on centrifugal pumps, we don't have one here, but everybody knows what a pump volute is. It's where the impeller is inside. At the bottom of the pump volute, we always put a drain cock, just kind of a little valve. You want to open that to drain out whatever water's in the volute. Examine the CW. I don't know if that even needs to be in the winterization list. But here's a catch-all for you. Visually inspect system for any trapped water.
You got checked
Got
out
X-ray
that are
vision?
fixing up?
X-ray vision. Well, this forces the technician to look at the pump station and say, all right, yeah, I got that out. There's water here. If you don't open this bypass valve and you have a drain on the bottom of this manifold,
That side doesn't get drained, yeah.
that kind of stuff. And what we do, our procedure, once we're completed, is to lock out the control panel with a zip tie. And we thread one of our business cards on there that says "Do not operate, winterized." That kind of protects us against somebody unknowingly trying to start their pumps. I mean, if you cut the zip tie and throw away the card and turn on the power and turn on the pumps, you deserve what's going to happen. Right. Unless you're a little kid, in which case your parents should pay something for that.
What if you have like a heating unit that's running out of the panel? Do you still lock it out?
It depends. I mean, what are we heating? If we're just heating the pump station, station's not going to operate, then no.
A lot of guys up by me do heat them anyway.
Yeah.
They get heat in a pump house, and if it's like a bunker or if it's an insulated building, and
Keep it at 40 degrees or something, or 45.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
just
I have
off chance. It's
I have customers that never used to winterize. They would just leave their heater on. I
Yeah.
said, well, that works great as long as you have power.
Yeah.
And reluctantly, they allow me to winterize their pump station. All right, you can winterize it if you want. Well, you paid for it, So, I guess
Dave,
briefly,
don't forget to add heat exchangers. You gotta blow out those heat exchangers.
This one doesn't have heat exchangers.
That one does.
this one doesn't. But he is right. You are right. Pat yourself on the back.
Reach that far.
And
Can't reach that far.
what is going on over here? I don't want to know. So one thing that's really important to understand about heat exchanger, water to heat exchangers, is that inlet and outlet actually matter. Like, you wouldn't even think they would. They're a thermostat, a fan, and a valve. But for some reason, if you hook them up backwards in the spring, they don't work. I know, it's crazy. You wouldn't even think that it wouldn't work. But most heat exchanger have coils that will drain themselves. But I will blow into the tube and make sure. Don't tell anyone. It's kind of gross.
I carry a little tank. How's that? Huh?
Yeah.
I got a little button.
I plug in a compressor and I blow through all the tubes, and I take off the clay valve top with an air gun, and anything else I can undo with an air gun, I undo with an air gun, because I ain't a kid anymore.
Yeah, air gun. Impact Grants Electric, that's what I use.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's just, it speeds up the process so much. It saves you
The
Knuckles.
old guy in the group. Yeah. So let's talk briefly about our in-season checkups. I'm just going to talk about them because we're going to do the startup training. That's basically what it is. You know, occasionally we'll get a call from a customer that wants us to come check their system out. Usually we don't. However, we do offer a maintenance program for our local customers here that includes a spring startup, in-season checkup or two, depending on which program they buy, and then the winterization. Plus, they get discounts on parts and labor if they do have issues, bumps on the way. The cool thing about an in-season checkup is you don't have to fill their main line up before you leave, which some can take quite some time. But for most intents and purposes, it is the same as a startup, which will be explained to you here in a minute. Okay, so this is the list. I need to reorganize. I don't use a list. I just do the work and then I come back and check off the list before I leave. Make sure I didn't forget anything. I guess I'll keep this guy. So when I come in the spring, first of all, I get a call. Hey, I need you to come start me up. Awesome. I'm glad you called. Do you have water yet? Oh no, I don't have water yet. What do you want me to do? Bring a water truck? So make sure they have water before you go out there, is the moral of that story. Now when you show up, we're going to kind of reverse our whole winterization process. Reconnect all the tubings, all of the, the valves need to be in their open position except for the bypass, which needs to be all the way closed. Oh, you know something I skipped on that winterization? Checking the sump for sediment accumulation. I know I said you need to do it, but I remembered not telling you now. What we use are fish sticks, the electrical fish sticks that use to pull wire through conduit. They're like 3 feet long. You screw them together. We buy 2 sets, so we have 30 feet. Wait, you get 24 feet if they're all connected end to end. And I'll take off their low water float cover and just throw the stick down there. You will feel when you start hitting silt, and then just take a measurement from there till you hit concrete. Now when we make a pump column, traditionally it's 12 inches from the bottom of the sump, which gives you a full foot of silt before you're going to have problems. Usually I alert the customer when they're at 6 inches or more. If they're above a foot, I will not run their pump station. Just because I pulled out so many burnt up pumps. Yeah, jeez, what was it? Last year we ended up going to a school and they burnt up their pony pump and their other pump wasn't performing, and they're like, what the heck? They had like 2 feet of silt. Oh, well, can I run it until you guys get a vacuum truck? I'm like, you can do whatever you want, but I'm leaving it off. Alright, because I'm not going to be a party to this. I'm like the tire shop. Your tires are too bald, I'm not going to rotate them. Liability. Okay, so that, if, huh?
Nothing.
What do you tell them? Huh? What do you tell them? What do you tell them?
We don't have.
Oh.
Typically not. No. We have wet wells that occasionally get salted in, but
Oh man, it's bad around here.
Because you guys are coming right off irrigation canals, right?
Yeah, I mean
That's
it's
just
out.
like chocolate
It's out of
milk.
Lucky Peak Lake. It comes out like this green soupy water, and
that's why they put more filters around here too.
depending on where you are in our system, depending on where you are, what canal you're off of, and if you're pumping out of a pass-through box, you know, if the water's coming in and then back out into another system, those get way worse, way faster. And I would say, I don't know, on average, like once every 3 or 4 years. We'll have to call a vacuum truck for any given sump. I say some of them are worse than others, and depending on water quality and location, I mean, it could take less than a year in some places.
So there's not the precision vacuum truck.
There's no precision vacuum truck. However, we do have a commercial account with Master Rooter, and yeah, their truck always smells like shit.
Any of these water bodies,
Imagine that.
pumping systems after a fire,
What's that?
these pumping systems in your upstream water works, it's done for fire, brings all that silt down.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You've done the cleaning, I mean, we were cleaning, and shutting things off every week.
Well, I remember
Sun
going.
Valley on Beaver Creek Farm.
I guess I didn't go up. I remember sending some guys up to Golden Eagle to replace a well pump. That they were using this well to fill a pond, and they would dip the helicopter buckets in it. Yeah. Yeah, that was a straight up fire drill, man. We were.
That was a real one.
Yeah. Yeah, they were like, there is a fire and we need water, and the pump went down. Like, oh crap.
Right in the middle of the helicopters, we had 10 helicopters, I live right next door where he's talking.
Yeah.
And they emptied, how big a pond is that? 5
5-acre pond, yeah. Wow.
Probably 8, 10 feet deep, they sucked it dry.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was like one of those get your ass down here and change this effing pump now. Sir, yes sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was fun. You know, it's always good to be involved in part of the solution. So, yeah, check for silt. You know, if you're at like the 6-inch area for 3 years, you may be good for another. I don't know. It's up to the owner. That's what I say. You have 6 inches of silt since whenever, and you know, I recommend you clean it. If they don't, sorry, you burnt up another pump. Now, before we turn off the power, and so did I give you guys a qualified personnel talk yesterday? All right, there's some guys here that didn't hear it. So, qualified personnel.
That's
for
why
this,
we're here, Dave, is to get qualified, right?
For the no.
What?
No. For the purpose of our class, qualified personnel is someone who understands and feels comfortable working with power. All right. So that doesn't mean they're an electrician, and I'm not going to judge. I'm not the law. But if you don't feel comfortable messing around inside a panel, don't. You know, if you don't understand at least a little bit about how electricity works, you should probably, you know, stay away from it. Call somebody else, or just skip this entire step. Yeah. If you have the ability to turn the power off before the pump station, I mean, if that's going to kill your lights, it's not the end of the world. I just want to have the power off here. Now, keep in mind, guys, that we could have a clock remote starting this pump station. We could have external voltages for who knows what to do, God knows what, that may not get turned off when you turn off the disconnect. So what I do is I've got one of those little voltage detector pins. Beep, 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 beep.
NCV.
That's what it is?
NCV, they call it, no contact voltage.
No contact voltage. Now wave that around those wires down the bottom with the field strip, and keep in mind something. They don't work on DC voltage. All right, so if they don't like 100% guarantee you're not going to get shocked. I learned that lesson the easy way. I don't usually. No, I had drive powered up, and I'm like, you know, killed the power. I'm like, use my voltage detector to make sure the DC bus is dead. I'm like, oh, no beeping. Cool. And then I'm like, wait a minute. It should still be hot. So I hook up my DC, you know, setting on the multimeter, and there was still like 400 volts on it. I'm like, gosh dang. So, you know, something to keep in mind about the
No contact voltage.
no contact voltage detectors. They don't work on DC power. All right, so now that we've declared this panel to be safe to stick our fingers in, what I like to do, I know in the list here it says inspect and tighten all electrical connections. I would like to make a revision to that for our group's sake. If you go through every single checkup, spring startup, and tighten every single power connection, eventually you're going to be breaking stuff. Stuff is going to strip out. So what I like to do is I do what I call the crunch test. I'll grab a wire, wiggle it around, I'll give it a tug. If I hear a crunch, that's bad. That's, you know, melted, cracked insulation. So I'll go through all the different power connections, do the crunch test, give them a tug, you know, just make sure everybody's tight, nobody's making too much noise. Now, you don't want to like pull with all your might, but give them enough of a tug to know that they're not just going to fall out when you walk away. Another thing, I guess, before you start sticking your hands in there is look with your eyeballs. Do you see mice? Yes? Yeah. Alright, that's bad. Mice are bad. If you do see mice, you should put on some gloves and try not to breathe that crap because it's got disease in it or something. It's pretty gross. I don't know, right? That's what I've heard.